I have a simple question for you. What colors are evil? Could it be the darkness associated with black, the lust of the color red, or maybe the sickness of gray? What if I told you that there was one color that unifies all of the others in the world of bad guys? A color that isn't necessarily the most popular, but definitely has more than its fair share of bad guys, evildoers, and ne'er-do-wells. Today, we are going to take a deep dive into the world of purple villains. Purple is a really common color for villains and evil iconography. But why? What does purple mean? And more importantly, is the use of purple a conscious or unconscious choice by these characters' creators? This was a topic brought to my attention by one of our community members, Blue Hope, who reached out asking me and a bunch of other great YouTubers a simple question. Does anybody else notice that villains love purple? I told him to look out for a video on the topic in a few days and... Happy anniversary? But before we get to the villains themselves, I think that we can learn a ton by jumping back in time. Because up until the 1850s, purple almost never appeared on any sort of flags or clothes. The only people who had access to purple anything was royalty. Purple dye was derived from a specific snail that came from a specific region of Lebanon, and it took thousands of snails to make 1 ounce of purple dye. The dye eventually became so rare that at one point it was worth more than its weight in gold. So naturally, that led to the only people getting their hands on it being people of royal descent or nobility. That's why purple is associated with royalty, luxury, and rarity. After a little more research on the topic, words generally connotated with the positive aspects of purple include power, vision, spirituality, peace, nobility, fulfillment, romanticism, and magic. Some more negatively connotated words are inferiority, gloominess, frustration, nostalgia, vengeance, sadness, and suppression. And I would personally like to add one more to this list: unnatural, since there are so few things occurring naturally that are purple. I also think that's why a lot of fiction that has alien or otherwise foreign design tends to set it in that color. And now that we have this list together, we can see if these descriptors hold true and see if we could get some answers. Starting off in the Disney corner, because believe me, they have a lot of them. There are characters like Dr. Facilier, the Evil Queen, and Maleficent, who represent magic, luxury, and power respectively. Randall feels frustrated because deep down he believes that he is the best scarer, but others see him as inferior to Sully. Yzma's frustrated in her role as Kuzco's advisor, and feels that her vision of what her empire could be is being suppressed by Kuzco's self-obsession. Frieza, while obviously not purple entirely, has huge purple accents as part of his design. He has a huge inferiority complex. He obsessively exerts his power, expects nothing less than perfection from his troops, and flies off the handle in the face of embarrassment. If you want to talk about creativity, you have villains like the Joker trying to ratchet up his crimes in clever ways. Same goes for the toddler-friendly version of the Joker, Robbie Rotten. Mr. Glass is a profoundly sad character who, despite being correct eventually, romanticizes the idea of superpowered individuals for decades with no proof. Skeletor, with his purple cloak, purple cat, and whole skull motif, is the embodiment of gloominess and power. Angelica Pickles isn't a villain, but she's definitely the closest thing to a villain that Rugrats has. She continually tries to exert her power over the babies, and in a way, constantly tries to suppress them. If you look at the Marvel universe, some of its most feared and powerful villains are purple. Kang the Conqueror has a borderline god complex. Galactus is so powerful that he can end a planet without hesitation. And then we get to the purple villain that I feel is the embodiment of everything purple villains have to offer: Thanos. Specifically, the cinematic version of the character from Avengers: Infinity War and Endgame. The Thanos of the comics also fits most of these descriptors, but there's one specific change that made Thanos' cinematic incarnation a really good embodiment of the purple villain. In his quest for the Infinity Stones, the Thanos of the movies is on a spiritual crusade, trying to fulfill what he feels is his destiny. In Avengers: Infinity War, we get to see more of his human side. We as the audience get to see this because he feels comfortable to act in a more vulnerable way because he has the ultimate protection: the Power Stone, which also happens to be purple. As a result, we as the audience get to see him push what he believes to be his noble grand vision and worldview onto everybody. We get to see his frustration with the state of the world and the way that he romanticizes this perfectly balanced universe, along with his nostalgia for how Titan used to be. Driven by a sense of vengeance, when his proposed plan was suppressed on Titan, he was frustrated and dedicated the rest of his life to try and fix that feeling. When he finally manages to win, an empty and sad Thanos tells Gamora that it cost him everything. The more he gains, the more he also loses. He wins the Time Stone, but Ebony Maw dies. He gains the Soul Stone, but he had to sacrifice Gamora. And the snap pretty much destroyed his arm. He lost everything to achieve his goal, but he believed that it was for the greater good. So he sits on the porch at the end of Infinity War, fulfilled and proud of what he did. The younger Thanos of Endgame is the opposite side of that same coin, a being of raw power, frustrated that the plan of his future self didn't yield a grateful, balanced universe. He walks the line between inferiority and God complex, romanticizing the idea of his own new universe created in his own vision with every last atom specified to his liking. Again, he's driven by vengeance, but this time, instead of avenging Titan, he's avenging his older self. All of the other villains I mentioned largely represent just one or two of these traits, but Thanos encapsulates essentially the entire list. So that leads us to Blue Hope's original question. Are these villains being purple a conscious or subconscious choice by their creators? I honestly believe that for most of these villains, making them purple was a subconscious choice, and I think that a big reason why comes from that classic connotation with royalty and nobility. A ton of these classic villains are either royal, of great importance, or aspiring to those ideals. So I think that in the eyes of the artist, when they're trying to determine a color, purple just seems like a color that fits. As for most of the villains who aren't royalty, and even some of them who are, they're otherworldly and alien. Since purple is the most unnatural color there is, it's easy to see why artists would gravitate towards it, trying to mark the character as something not of this earth. Additionally, I believe that whether the character's appearance or personality is designed first, there's an influence going in both directions, that one informs the other. So many of these villains and their archetypes fit so cleanly within their traits that I have to believe and ultimately conclude that there's a definite connection. So that raises one last question. What do all the other colors represent?